Hello students, this is your Mr. GST, the one who makes your GST a good and simple tax. Actually, in this video, we are going to quickly revise tax invoice, credit note and debit notes chapter. In this chapter, see, there is nothing like any concepts etc involved. It is all about only, sir, different types of documents we are going to use at different occasions. So which document when we will be using and what are the contents of the document, all the stuff related to that we are going to discuss in this video. Now coming to that first topic, sir, we already saw section 31 in time of supply chapter. What is the due date to raise tax invoice is dealt in section 31. So time limit to raise invoice, we have already seen that goods and services separately. If you remember, when the goods movement is involved, not involved, continuous supply of goods, and we have seen goods and for sale on approval, services, general rule, continuous supply of services, and service ceases before completion. All these things we have seen. Now first of all, see, the basic thing is whenever we think about tax invoice, we always feel like tax invoice will be raised by the supplier. But understand, tax invoice is not only raised by suppliers, sir, there is also a situation where the tax invoice is raised by the recipient. Sir, if you are supplying taxable goods or services, you can raise a tax invoice, or you are receiving taxable goods or services from unregistered supplier, then you can raise tax invoice on yourself. So that way, tax invoice can be raised even by the supplier or the recipient. So there is one clarity we have to get. Now, sir, regarding section 31, the time limit to raise tax invoice, we have already discussed in chapter time of supply, that as I already told you. So in this, we are going to see now particulars of tax invoice. What are the particulars? What are the contents of tax invoice? The rule 46 talks about the contents of tax invoice, mostly general points here and there. There are some technical things. Let us see that. So first one, sir, the contents are like GST of the supplier should be there, the description of the goods and services should be there, out what is the amount of tax you are charging, and importantly the serial number of the invoice, which can be maximum of 16 characters. It can be any combination of alpha, numeric, even the special characters. Okay, the only thing is it should be a maximum 16 characters serial number, and every year you should start the fresh series, fresh series. And sir, you can also have multiple series in the same financial year. For different clients also you can maintain different series, that is also allowed. Okay, so that is what the point. Next, date of issue of the invoice. Yes, of course, serial number cannot be duplicate. Okay, and date of issue of invoice should be there, and total value of the supply should be there, and GST of the recipient if he is registered, place of supply, quantity in case of goods, what is the quantity you are selling, address of delivery where there is like any delivery address other than place of supply, that you should mention. And this is another interesting point, name and address of the recipient. If he is registered, definitely you should give that. But if he is unregistered, if it is exceeding 50,000 value, the value of supply exceeding greater than or equal to 50,000, then you should give the address of the supplier. With respect to this, I have a small point actually, sir. The value and address, name and address of the recipient, if you see, we have already understood, sir. If it is greater than or equal to 50,000, it is mandatory, you should give name and address of the recipient even if he is unregistered. But if it is less than 50,000, sir, it is optional, you can give if you want, otherwise you need not give. But please understand, sir, if it is supply of online money gaming, or supply of taxable services by or through e-commerce operator, or supply of OIDR services, for example Rummy Circle, or for example Ola, or for example G Drive you are upgrading. For all these things, even though the recipient is unregistered, even though the value of supply is not exceeding 50,000, sir, if it is less than 50,000 also, still you have to give name and address of the recipient. So I repeat, sir, normally name and address of the recipient, if not registered, required only if it is greater than or equal to 50,000 value of supply. But even though it is less than 50,000, if it is, the supply is what? The supply is online money gaming, and the next by or through e-commerce operator any supply is made, or OIDR services. For that, definitely the name and address of the recipient should be there in the invoice. Okay, that is with respect to name and address. And of course, taxable value of the value of the supply, whether tax is payable on reverse charge, that should be mentioned. HSN code, tax rates, signature of the supplier or his authorized person, whoever it is. Digital signature is also fine, but if it is a e-invoice, no need of any signature. Next, QR code, which is having IRN number, and this will come into picture only if it is an e-invoice concept. Okay, and remember always, invoice is not valid without invoice reference number IRN. E-invoice is not valid without IRN. So in some problems you will be getting some invoice without IR and all that stuff. So on that you cannot take ITC because it is not a valid invoice. It is not a proper document to give you ITC. That please remember. These are the particulars of tax invoice. Now, as we have seen already in the particulars of tax invoice, they are talking about giving HSN code. If you see, Sir, HSN code, what they are trying to tell is, sir, with respect to HSN code, they are giving a relaxation to us. If your aggregate turnover is less than or equal to 5 crores in the preceding financial year, in the invoice, sir, your HSN code B2B supplies now 4 digits sufficient, sir, mandatory, sir. 8 digits is the HSN code, but 4 digits, first 4 digits if you give, that is more than sufficient. B2C 4 digits optional, it is up to you, your will and wish. If you want to give it, otherwise not required. So I repeat, HSN code in the invoice, sir, if your aggregate turnover in the preceding financial year is not exceeding 5 crores, 4 digits is sufficient. If it is exceeding 5 crores, 6 digits for both B2B and B2C mandatory. Okay, that is what the point. Okay, sir. Now, sir, how many copies of invoice I should give, sir? Manner of issuing the invoice is, sir, nothing but, sir, you should give, if at all it is goods, you should give 3 copies, triplicate. One is for the recipient, the other is for transporter, the other is for the supplier. Sir, if it is services, 2 copies enough, because you will not transport the services, correct? Saloon services transported from Chennai to Bengaluru, can I say that way? No, so duplicate is sufficient. Okay, original for recipient, duplicate is for supplier. So goods means 3 copies of invoices you maintain, services means you maintain 2 copies. That is the reason when you go to any small shops where they are maintaining the manual books, you see the copy of invoice book, 3 colors, pink, white, yellow kind of thing and all, or blue, all that stuff. So because of this reason. Okay, sir. Now coming to export invoices, sir, Sir, if the invoice is related to export, sir, what you should do on the invoice, you should mention, sir, what is that you have to mention? See, you know, exports, sir, are 0 rated supplies, and you have 2 options: either export the goods or services with payment of tax, or export them without payment of tax. So on the invoice, you should mention whether it is supply with payment of tax or supply without payment of tax. Like that, you should mention on the invoice. Okay, fine. Next, sir, it is also important to note that particulars of export invoices are same as tax invoice, and with respect to recipient is unregistered and value of supply is that greater than or equal to 5,000. Instead, name of the state and its code. In export invoice, name of the country and destination is to be determined. Okay, so the point is, sir, if at all it is an export invoice, yes, export invoice only, sir, it will have same particulars like tax invoice. And here in this case, recipient is unregistered. Now you should give the details, name and address of the recipient. If the value is exceeding 50,000, if I am exporting with less than 50,000, I will export. So greater than or equal to 50,000, you are exporting. So name and address you should give. No, so there, if you are giving, sir, instead of that state name, all the stuff, that country name and the destination, whatever is there, if it is mentioned, then it is sufficient. You cannot mention exporting the invoice to Arunachal Pradesh or Gujarat, like that, correct? So the name of the country has to be given. Okay, next. Sir, here, is there any particular specific format for tax invoice? Nothing like that. You are free to use your creativity. However you want to design, you design your own tax invoice format. The only thing the law requires is the particulars of tax invoice we have discussed. No, they are the mandatory fields. Sir, that if those invoices are there, that is more than sufficient. So if those mandatory particulars are there, then it is sufficient. Next one, what is next one, sir? Any invoice or debit note issued in pursuance of tax payable in accordance with the provisions of section 74, 129, 130 shall prominently contain the words input tax credit not admissible. So obviously section 74 will come into picture when there is willful evasion of taxes, all that, and 129, 130 detention of vehicles, all that stuff. So there, whenever you are giving the invoice, there you should use the word input tax credit not admissible. Okay, fine, that is not that great point, don't worry about that. Next, you know, if you remember section 17 subsection 5 blocked credit, there we have seen this point. You remember, ITC is not allowed if you have paid taxes under section 74, 129 and 130. Next. So that is with respect to tax invoice. So okay, sir, we are done with the tax invoice thing. Now, sir, we have to move on to revised tax invoice. Sir, what is the meaning of revised tax invoice? Revised tax invoice, simple concept. If you remember our effective date of registration concept, sir, when a person is becoming liable for registration and he is applying for registration within 30 days from the date of becoming liable, the effective date of registration is date of becoming liable. I repeat, when any person who is liable for registration applies for registration within 30 days of becoming liable, then you know the effective date of registration is date of becoming liable for registration, correct? But sir, I became liable on 1st November. I got registration certificate on 10th December, sir. From 1st November to 10th December, even though I am effectively registered from 1st November, I don't know my registration certificate number, no sir. So I don't know my GST again. So What should I do? Sir, whatever the invoices you have raised from 1st November to 10th December are normal invoices, not tax invoices. Now you can convert them into revised tax invoices, okay? So that you can continue passing on the credit, all that stuff, and you can also raise a tax invoice on your customer. So I repeat, earlier we have raised normal invoice to the customer. Now we are revising them and converting them into revised tax invoice. This concept is complementing that effective date of registration, where you become liable for registration within 30 days, apply for registration, and after getting registration certificate, the effective date of registration will be still the date when you became liable. So between this time gap, whatever the invoices you have raised, that invoices will be converted into tax invoice. That is what we are calling as revised tax invoice. Okay, super. Now coming to the next one, another variety, sir, consolidated revised tax invoice. Sir, what is this consolidated revised tax invoice? Consolidated revised tax invoice, please understand there is an amendment here. Here it is not 2,50,000, it is 1 lakh. Okay. Now, if you remember GST return filing, GSTR1, please understand. First, let us go with the logic of that provision. Sir, one second. First, let me tell you concept related to GSTR1. In GSTR1 or 1A, sir, what we will do? We will give all B2B details as well as B2C details, correct, if you remember? Sir, the point is, if at all B2B details, we should give invoice wise details. B2C, what we are doing, B2C we are dividing them into B2C large and B2C others. If you remember in returns chapter, this flow chart will be there, B2C others. Sir, B2B invoices, we will give invoice wise details in the GSTR1 or 1A. B2C large means what, sir? First of all, B2C large means, sir, first of all, it is an interstate supply invoice. Interstate supply invoice with value greater than 1 lakh. With value greater than 1 lakh. Earlier it was 2,50,000. Now it is 1 lakh. B2C large invoices means interstate supply to an unregistered person where value is exceeding 1 lakh. That is B2C large invoices. Those invoices also, what we should do in the GST return, invoice wise we should give. But all other invoices, B2C others, all other invoices, consolidated rate wise, state wise, if you provide, more than sufficient. I repeat, rate wise, state wise, if you provide, that is more than sufficient. So please understand, sir, what are the details we should report in GSTR1? When we are reporting the details in GSTR1, the tax invoice details, sir, B2B, B2C, there are two categories. Again, what we are doing there, B2B we are segregating, and B2C again we are segregating it as B2C large and B2C others. That means B2B invoices you should give invoice wise, B2C large you should give invoice wise. B2C large means what? Interstate greater than 1 lakh. Okay, interstate greater than 1 lakh. B2C others, consolidated, sir, within Tamil Nadu I made 12% sales this much, 5% sales this much, 18% sales this much. Same way to Telangana, 5% sales this much, 12% sales this much, 18% sales this much. Like that, I will give consolidated details, state wise, rate wise. Okay, so that is what B2C others. So now you tell me, when I have to give details B2B and B2C large invoice wise, I can never play with them. I cannot give any relaxation there. So what we are doing here, B2C others, we are giving a relaxation. What is that relaxation? They revised the tax invoice there. Vishnu became liable for registration, and from the date of becoming liable for registration till the date of grant of registration certificate, during this time gap, Vishnu made 10 supplies. Vishnu made 10 supplies to one customer. I should give 10 revised tax invoices. Instead of giving the 10 revised tax invoices, we are saying you can consolidate the 10 and give 10 consolidated revised, one consolidated revised tax invoice for the 10 revised tax invoice. Instead of giving 10 revised tax invoice, you give one consolidated revised tax invoice. What is the condition there? Sir, first of all, supplier should be unregistered person, and it should be, sir, simple. In simple words, what I can say this is B2C others, I can say. All B2C others. If you see, for example, look at this example. Vishnu became liable for registration on 2nd September and is applying for registration on 4th September. He is getting registration certificate on 29th September. Okay. In such cases, sir, his effective date of registration is 2nd September, even though he got the certificate on 29th September. The supplies made during this time gap. What he can do, sir, he can give the revised tax invoices, correct? Now, he can do that only with respect to unregistered person, whether intrastate or interstate. If it is interstate, sir, value should not be exceeding 1 lakh. All such supplies he can consolidate and give one single consolidated revised tax invoice. Now, if you see during that time gap, 2nd September to 29 September, Vishnu made supplies to Rohit, my customer in Maharashtra. 4 supplies I made. He is registered B2B. I cannot play with him. So I should give 4 revised tax invoices. 4 revised tax invoices. Yes or no? That is what has to be done. Next, coming to Jadeja, sir, another customer who is unregistered but from Gujarat. Sir, for him, I can give revised tax invoices. 1 second. Sorry, there are change in numbers. Actually, the amount has changed. No? So the limit was earlier 2,50,000. Now it is 1 lakh, right? So now, sir, Jadeja is there, my customer who is unregistered from Gujarat. Now for him, there are 4 supplies I made during that time gap. So one supply is 1,20,000, 60,000, 90,000, and 1 lakh. Now you tell me that here this is exceeding 1 lakh, right? So when it is exceeding 1 lakh, I cannot consolidate it. Sir, I should give a separate revised tax invoice for that, and balance, sir, 60,000, 90,000, 1 lakh is also fine. It should not be more than 1 lakh. All these remaining 3 things what I can do, I can consolidate and I can give a consolidated revised tax invoice. See, for Rohit I give revised tax invoice for all the supplies. Separately I give revised tax invoice. For Jaddu what I did, one revised tax invoice for supply 5 because it is greater than 1 lakh, because it is B2C, large. Okay, next other B2C, yes sir, we can give 6, 7 and 8 for all that invoices. I can consolidate and give him the consolidated revised tax invoice. That is the next one. And coming to Raina, sir, Raina is my customer from Tamil Nadu, unregistered. I am also from Tamil Nadu, unregistered. Tamil Nadu. I am also Tamil Nadu, but I am registered. Raina is unregistered, so it is B2C within the state. No matter what is the value of supply. Please understand, no matter what is the value, you can happily consolidate everything. Am I clear? So here I will give to Raina one consolidated revised tax invoice for 9, 10, 11, 12, all the supplies. Hope it is clear. So if you want to just so you can just go through that if you want. Pause the video for 2 seconds. First go through the question here and then think about the answer. Right, hope it is clear for you. So this is the answer. So with this we are done with consolidated revised tax invoice. Now let us move on to consolidated tax invoice. Sir, what is this consolidated tax invoice? Sir, any registered person, sir, when he is making supplies in the day, whatever the supplies he has made during the day, for all the supplies he can raise a consolidated tax invoice at the end of the day. But there are some conditions here. One is, first, the customer should be unregistered for sure. Value of supply less than 200, not less than or equal to, less than 200. And next one is, the customer should not ask for tax invoice. If he's asking for tax invoice, you should not say no, law has given me the permission to go for consolidated tax invoice. If you want invoice, you come at night. Like that you cannot say. Customer should not be needing tax invoice. Okay, so that is the case. So number one, sir, first of all, unregistered person. Next, value of supply less than 200, and finally he doesn't require tax invoice. For all such supplies, what you can do, at the end of the day, at the night, you can raise the tax invoice. That is what we call as consolidated tax invoice. And the interesting part here is, sir, here this option to raise consolidated tax invoice is not available to people who are exhibiting the cinematograph films in multiplex screens. Okay, like PVR, all that. Now coming to the next one, that is with respect to consolidated tax invoice. And of course there is one more thing here, sir, whatever the tickets they are issuing in multiplex screens, that itself will be treated as tax invoice. Okay, so whatever the electronic ticket they are giving, that itself will be treated as tax invoice. So nothing but you don't give ticket separately, invoice separately again. So don't take so much of workload. Whatever the ticket you are giving, let it have all the details regarding the rule 46 what we have asked for, and whatever the ticket you are issuing, that itself will be treated as tax invoice. That is what they are trying to tell here. Next, so not only the multiplex screen people and others also are allowed to do this. The ticket itself will be taken as tax invoice provided it is containing all the details. So that is what with respect to this, yes, consolidated tax invoice and other details. Let us move on to bill of supply. The next one, bill of supply is nothing but simple, sir. You are a registered person. If you are unregistered person, we will not worry about you. We will not talk about you at all. Sir, you are a registered person, and what you are doing, you are supplying exempted goods or services. When you are supplying exempted goods or services, is there any tax implication in the invoice? No, sir. You cannot collect any tax. So you cannot give tax invoice. So you are giving bill of supply. Not only that, sir, I am registered under GST, sir, but I am under composition scheme, sir. If you are under composition scheme, you cannot collect tax from the customer, correct? Because you cannot collect tax from the customer, you cannot raise a tax invoice. So obviously we are issuing bill of supply. So bill of supply will come in two situations. Number one, sir, first of all, fundamentally you are registered. One, you are making exempt supplies, or you are under composition scheme. In these two cases, you will issue a document called bill of supply. So bill of supply doesn't contain rate of tax and amount of tax, obvious, and there are contents of bill of supply they have given. So whatever the value we have mentioning in the bill of supply is not a taxable value. Tax itself is not there, so where taxable value will come into picture. So that is what all about bill of supply. Next one is receipt voucher. Sir, what is this receipt voucher? Nothing but, sir, whenever you are giving any advance for supply of value, supply of goods or services, that advance to acknowledge, I am giving a document called a receipt voucher. And while taking the advance, if you are not sure about whether this supply is going to be intrastate supply or interstate supply, in worst case, if you are not able to identify or determine, then, sir, it will be treated as interstate transaction, and you are not sure about the tax rate also, take 18% as tax rate. That is what the concept. Am I clear? So receipt voucher, I repeat, to acknowledge the receipt of advance, we are issuing receipt voucher. And if you are not sure at the time of taking the advance whether it is intrastate supply or interstate supply, treat it like interstate supply. And if you are also not sure about the tax rate, then take 18% as GST rate. Later on we can adjust the things. That is what all about receipt voucher. Sir, the next one is regarding refund voucher. What is refund voucher? Sir, you have received the advance, but supply is not done, invoice is not issued, and we are refunding the advance amount. Then what is the document we are going to issue now? Sir, we are going to issue refund voucher. So I repeat that if advance is received and supply not made, and without raising invoice, we are refunding the money, so we will give refund voucher. Clear? Now you may get a doubt, sir, what if I have raised invoice, sir? Then you will issue a credit note and give it to him instead of going with refund voucher. So that is what all about refund voucher. The next one is invoice and payment voucher. Guys, simple, understand. I'll tell you in simple terms what is this payment voucher, all that stuff. First of all, if it is an RCM transaction, recipient should give payment voucher to the supplier. Simple. Recipient should give payment voucher to the supplier. And now the recipient will give payment voucher to the supplier. If supplier is registered, what supplier will do? Supplier will give tax invoice. Hey, this is RCM tax invoice, you go and pay tax under RCM, like that. Supplier will give tax invoice, recipient will go and pay GST under RCM. But sir, if supplier is unregistered, recipient should give payment voucher, recipient should raise tax invoice on himself, and he should pay GST on that. So simple, I repeat, sir, RCM supply, recipient will give payment voucher for sure. Whether supplier is registered or unregistered, recipient will give payment voucher to supplier. If supplier is registered, supplier return, he will give tax invoice. If supplier is unregistered, recipient only will raise tax invoice on himself. That is what we call as self invoice. We have already seen that during 16 subsection 2 discussion. Okay, so that is with respect to that particular invoice and payment voucher. The next one, invoice cum bill of supply. Sir, what is this invoice cum bill of supply? Sir, where you are making both taxable as well as exempted supplies to an unregistered person. That is important. To an unregistered person, you can give a document called invoice cum bill of supply. Am I clear? So hybrid invoice, we can say both taxable as well as exempt things are covered, and that too, I repeat, recipient should be unregistered. That is what very important. So if you see the next one, sir, certain people, certain suppliers may issue tax invoice, but they are also permitted to issue any other document in lieu of tax invoice. Here in this topic, we are going to see, sir, certain people, they got some relaxation with respect to contents of tax invoice. If you see, sir, insurance company, banking company, financial institutions and NBFCs, for them, they need not have serial number and address of the recipient in the tax invoice. So that is optional for them. And other particulars, whatever we have discussed in rule 46, all those particulars are of course mandatory except serial number and address of the recipient. And one more thing is that they can raise a consolidated tax invoice at the end of the month for all the supplies made during the month. At the end of the month, either physically or electronically, they can raise the consolidated tax invoice. That is another point for them. Now coming to the next one, sir, GTA. For GTA, there is no relaxation given. One extra additional obligation is given, that is consignment note. Sir, they have to give consignment note along with the tax invoice. And if you remember, GTA definition itself is what? Has one point, extra point. If at all they are issuing consignment note only, we are calling them as GTA, right? So for them, no optional information, only one extra obligation, that is consignment note, and all other things as per rule 46 they have to follow. And supplier of passenger transportation services, for them also, sir, serial number and address of the recipient is not required in the invoice, and other information whatever is there in rule 46, that has to be followed. And of course, as we have already discussed, sir, here just like multiplex screens, all that, sir, here also whatever the tax invoice they are issuing, Sir, the ticket itself, what they are issuing itself can be treated as tax invoice. No need to separately give ticket and no need to give separately a tax invoice. Sir, ticket itself, if it is containing all the particulars of Rule 46, then that itself will be treated as tax invoice. Next, one more thing is nothing but as we have discussed already this point regarding multiplex screens, right? Okay, next, sir, delivery challan. What is the next document? The next document we are going to see is delivery challan. Sir, when this document will come into picture, simply understand, sir, this document will come into picture when you cannot raise a tax invoice. Sir, for raising the e-way bill, we need a supporting document called tax invoice generally. But whenever we cannot raise a tax invoice, we will raise a delivery challan, and with the help of delivery challan, we will issue the e-way bill. We will raise the e-way bill. So that is the main purpose of delivery challan. Now, see, what are the cases here, sir? When I am supplying the liquid gas where the quantity of the liquid gas is not known at the time of removal, or when I am transporting the goods for job work, I am not making a supply, I am not making any supply actually as such. And here what is happening, sir, I cannot raise a tax invoice on my job worker. In that case, I can raise a delivery challan. I am transporting the goods for any reasons other than by way of supply, maybe line sales, etc., or such other notified supplies, sir, you can raise a delivery challan. And delivery challan, what they can do at the time of removal of the goods, it may be removed on delivery challan. Invoice can be issued after the delivery of the goods also, and it is also should be serially numbered, not exceeding 16 characters, same story. And the contents of delivery challan, it should be raised in triplicate copy, all that. So you can just go through that procedure, not that greatly relevant, nothing to worry. Now, sir, registered jewelry suppliers. Sir, this is regarding a clarification regarding registered jewelry suppliers, and this is equally applicable for everybody. Sir, what they are doing now here, sir, registered jewelry suppliers, they will take the jewelry what they have manufactured, like goldsmiths, all these people, sir, they will manufacture jewelry and they will travel to different states, and there they will go to jewelry shops and show their work, and if the jewelry shop owner likes that work, and he will purchase that jewelry. So till somebody buys that, they are not sure about whether this jewelry will be sold or not. Now they are taking jewelry along with them, right? So when they are taking jewelry along with them, they cannot raise a tax invoice and they cannot raise e-way bill on that. Sir, first of all, of course, for jewelry, the e-way bill is exempted. That is not a big deal. Now coming to the point, sir, they cannot raise a tax invoice when they are moving the goods because there is no supply actually. So what the department has clarified here, sir, let them travel without raising the tax invoice, but an invoice book along with them. So whenever the supply is made there, they should raise the tax invoice. That is what the point they have told. Sir, may need to travel to other states for sale on approval. So they have to carry the goods for supply. If approved, they will issue tax invoice at the time of supply. Otherwise, they will not raise. So they cannot register themselves as casual taxable person, as they cannot ascertain their supplies beforehand, and they cannot make an advance deposit of tax. Just now we have discussed in registration chapter also, sir, advance deposit of tax also they cannot ascertain because of these things. Sir, we cannot call them as casual taxable person also. We cannot make them to register as casual taxable person also. So as per rule 55, sir, which allows the goods to be taken on sale on approval basis, they can move that to another location within or outside the state by giving a delivery challan and an e-way bill. So the person carrying the goods can carry the invoice book to issue it once the supply is fulfilled. Okay, so that way, as I told you, carry the bill book, and once the supply is confirmed, then raise the invoice. Otherwise, you can just have a delivery challan and move the goods. Okay, sir, the same logic is applicable even for the artists supplying their artwork to different states. Yes or no? Yes, artwork can be moved within or outside the state on a delivery challan along with the e-way bill. That is what the concept. So with this, we are done with the documents where relaxation is given and also the delivery challan concept. So the next one, if you see, the next one is nothing but credit note and debit note. Sir, when credit note is issued, when debit note is issued, you know, normally, sir, when, see, in GST, this is not accounting. In GST, what happens? Supplier will raise a tax invoice and supplier himself will raise a debit note. When supplier will raise a tax invoice, when there is supply happen. Sir, now with respect to that, he wants to reduce the value of supply. Then he will go with credit note. Or he wants to reduce the tax liability of supply, then he will issue credit note. Or when there is sales returns, then he will issue credit note. Or when there is goods or services supplied are found to be deficient, then he will issue credit note. So those are the cases here, sir. We will issue credit note in these cases, correct? And same way, sir, when debit note will be issued, sir, debit note will be issued when we want to increase the value of the supply or when we want to increase the tax liability. So in such cases, the debit note will be issued. So credit note will decrease the liability, debit note will increase the liability. So when the liability decreases, opposite party, obviously ITC also will decrease. When the liability increases, automatically for opposite party also liability, ITC will increase. So that is the logic we have to remember. Okay, fine, sir. Now, when credit note is issued, when debit note is issued, we are clear. And as I told you, in GST, sir, supplier only will issue credit note, supplier only will issue debit note to adjust the value of supply and other things. Okay, now, Sir, when I am issuing the credit note or debit note, sir, multiple invoices are there. For that, I should give multiple credit notes or debit notes. Imagine that way. Sir, instead of giving multiple credit notes or debit notes, the law is also giving an option to you. You can go with issuing a consolidated credit note or a consolidated debit note, where covering all the multiple invoices, giving reference to all such invoices in one consolidated credit note or debit note. You issue the document. 10 invoices are there, no need of giving 10 credit notes or 10 debit notes. You can give a consolidated credit note or a consolidated debit note, but that is optional. It is not mandatory. Don't worry. No, sir, for me, giving them separate itself is comfortable or convenient for accounting. Na? Do that, no issues. So that is with respect to consolidated credit note and debit note. So now here, please understand. Let me just finish this credit note, debit note details. In middle, something else has happened. No, listen. So now the point is, see, as we have already discussed, sir, supplier will raise tax invoice, credit note and debit note. Sir, supplier has the responsibility to give those tax invoice, credit note and debit note details in GSTR1. So in GSTR1, what the supplier has to do, he has to give his tax invoice details, debit note details and credit note details. Now, sir, credit note details, if I forget to give, then what is that I have to do, sir? Give it in the next month. That next month also I forgot this, sir. That next month also I forgot. That next month, that next month also I forgot. That next month, then also you forgot. Then what should I do, sir? There is a deadline for that, sir. For giving credit note details in the return, sir, the deadline is 30th November of the succeeding financial year or actual date of filing annual return, whichever is earlier of the relevant financial year. So same section 16 subsection 4 time limit. But the interesting point here is that for the debit note declaring in the returns, there is no such time limit mentioned. Okay, so that is the interesting thing here. So that is what all about the credit notes and debit notes. Now here the next one is the tax invoice by input service distributor. See, listen carefully. There are two cases. There are two possibilities. Number one, sir, there is an input service distributor. He is procuring some input services from an outsider, which is belonging to various branches. Sir, input service distributor, what he will do? He will raise an ISD invoice and distribute the credit to all the branches. This is one case what we know. The another possibility is, sir, input service distributor is there and some other branches are there. Let us assume input service distributor is in Tamil Nadu. Now in Tamil Nadu itself we have another branch. That branch what is doing now, sir, that Tamil Nadu registered entity, it is receiving some input services which are commonly used by all the branches in its own name. That means Tamil Nadu branch is receiving the invoice for the common services of all the branches. Now what this registered person in the same state with the same PAN of ISD will do, sir, that fellow will be having normal registration, correct? So he will raise an invoice, on the input service distributor and he will give the invoice, pass on the credit to ISD. What ISD will do now? ISD will now distribute the credit. That is what the concept. Okay, so simple. ISD is there, multiple branches are there. Sir, ISD directly procuring input services, he will raise the invoice, he will distribute the credit to the branches. No, sir, ISD is there, in the same state the another registration of the same PAN is there and that same branch is receiving the common services in its name, the invoice they are receiving in their name, and what that branch registered entity will do, will raise an invoice on ISD as if it is supplying services to ISD and ISD then will distribute the credit to the branches. That is what the concept. Okay, so that is what with respect to tax invoice by input service distributor, and there are contents, all that, there are general points, nothing to worry. So the next concept, if you see, the next concept is e-invoice actually in this chapter. Sir, e-invoice provisions are applicable to whom? First of all, sir, e-invoice provisions are applicable to a person whose aggregate turnover in any preceding financial year is exceeding 5 crore rupees. That means, for example, sir, 17-18 4 crores, 18-19 6 crores, 19-20 4 crores, again 20-21 1 crore, 3 crore, 4 crore. Now for 24-25 financial year, for me, whether e-invoice provisions are applicable? Yes, it is applicable, because in any one financial year, in any one preceding financial year from 17-18, if the aggregate turnover has exceeded 5 crores, for you e-invoice provisions are applicable. Hope it is clear, right? Now this is applicable only for B2B supplies, not for B2C. And anybody who is like willing to, sir, I want to voluntarily follow e-invoice provisions, sir, my aggregate turnover is not exceeding 5 crores, sir, still I will do it, sir, now please get lost, there is no space here, okay, in the website. So for you it is not available. Optionally you cannot follow this. Am I clear? Next, if it is 5 crores, then mandatory you have to follow. Next, sir, in the e-invoice, invoices, credit notes, debit notes, all are covered, but only B2B, not B2C. And also exports for this purpose should be considered as B2B or B2C, because in GST B2B means both are registered. Suppose you are exporting something to North Korea. Sir, can you call it as B2B because that fellow North Korea fellow has registered under Indian GST law? No. So the point is, sir, what should I do? Then the law says that exports are also to be treated as B2B supplies and raise e-invoice even though that fellow is not registered under GST. Okay. Then e-invoice is not applicable when, sir, if it is for input service distributor where it is recipient is liable to pay GST, importation of goods, B2C supplies, exempt supplies. For these things, sir, e-invoice provisions are not applicable. Okay. Sir, in e-invoice, what we will do, sir, generally? Nothing, sir. You will first generate an invoice from your accounting software, and generating the invoice in your accounting software, you should be doing it using the standard format, invoice format given by the government, GST INV01. So using that format, you generate the invoice. That invoice you will download in JSON format, and that file, from JSON file, you will come to a website, invoice registration portal. In that website, you log in and upload the JSON file, and once you upload the JSON file, the system will process it and give a document to you called e-invoice. And in that, what will happen now, 3 extra new items will be added in that. Number 1, IRN, invoice reference number, without which the e-invoice is not a valid invoice. QR code, quick response code will be there, and digital signature of the proper officer. If you remember, in particulars of tax invoice, we have seen digital signature is not required. Digital signature or signature of supplier is not required, but in the e-invoice, digital signature of proper officer will be there. So 3 things. One is invoice reference number, the other is QR code, the other is digital signature of the proper officer will be there in the e-invoice. And now download that e-invoice and give it to the customer. That means simple. Before giving the invoice to the customer, give it to the government. Government will take the record of that details, and then will give you the invoice with the 3 additional details, and that you give to your customer. So that we are trying to stop this fake invoices. Okay. Now coming to the point, what are the advantages? As I was telling, sir, fake invoices can be reduced, and whatever the information you are giving in e-invoices, that will be used in GSTR1 also and e-way bill generation also. E-way bill generation also, that will be used. That means whatever the information you are giving, that will be automatically shifted to those websites. Automatically that information will be shared with those websites. Information will be shared with those websites, and for you return filing, etc., will be easy also. Those are the advantages of e-invoice. Now coming to one interesting and important point here, sir, e-invoice provisions are not applicable for SCZ units. Please understand, SCZ units. We are not talking about developers. Sir, e-invoice provisions are applicable to SCZ developers, but for SCZ units, e-invoice provisions are not applicable. And also for insurance company, banking company, financial institutions, NBFCs, e-invoice provisions are not applicable. GTA is not applicable. Passenger transportation services not applicable. Multiplex screens not applicable. Government department and local authorities not applicable. Sir, for these people, e-invoice provisions are not applicable, even though the aggregate turnover is exceeding 5 crores in any preceding financial year from 17-18. Okay, and this relaxation is given for the entity as a whole, entire entity. This is not limited only to any particular nature of supply that has done. So this is applicable for the entity as a whole. Okay, and these people, what they have to do, because for them e-invoice provisions are not applicable, no, they should mention, they should give a declaration here. One second. They should give a declaration here. What is the declaration? Sir, they should give a declaration saying that, sir, even though e-invoice provisions are applicable for us, sorry, even though our aggregate turnover is exceeding 5 crores, for us e-invoice provisions are not applicable. Like that, they should give a declaration in the invoice that they are enjoying the relaxation from raising the e-invoice, like that. Okay, fine, that is one thing. And another interesting part here is, sir, generally when, no, we know that government departments, all the stuff we have seen here, they need not raise e-invoice. But sir, the doubt is, to them, when we are making a supply to government departments or local authorities who got registered under GST for the purpose of TDS compliance, section 51, they are not making any business, they are not doing any business, or they are not making actually any supplies, but they got registered under GST just to comply section 51 provisions. For such people, if you are sending any, making any supplies, should I consider it as B2B transaction and should I raise the invoice? Then the law says, yes, sir, they are also registered, no matter for what purpose, but they are registered under GST. Yes, to comply section 51 provisions only, but they are registered under GST. So if you make a supply to them, it is a B2B transaction. So yes, you should raise the e-invoice. Okay, so that is what the concept. You should raise e-invoice for them also. Okay, there is an example here. You can just go through that. And invoice registration portal. So there are these websites available for e-invoice registration portal. As I told you already, e-invoice will be valid only with a valid IRN. So invoice reference number. Invoice reference number is different. Invoice number is different. Don't misunderstand. Invoice number you will give. You will maintain the serial number. Invoice reference number the portal will give. Okay. And the QR code generated will be having all these things like what GST of the supplier, recipient, invoice number, date of generation, all that nonsense, normal things. Leave it. Next, sir, there is no requirement to carry the physical copy of tax invoice, sir, if there is e-invoice generated. Okay, very good advantage. So you are reducing my weight to carry. So next. Anything else? As I told you already, sir, invoice registration portal will send the data whatever has been given in e-invoices, so that it will be used for auto population of data in GSTR1 and GSTR2A for the respective receivers also, 2B whatever it is. Next, seller can cancel IRN of an invoice by reporting it in invoice registration portal within 24 hours of time, and amendment of invoice already uploaded on invoice registration portal will be done only while filing GSTR1. Otherwise, through invoice registration portal you cannot amend e-invoices. You can only cancel the invoice, but you cannot amend the invoice. Anything details which you want to amend in e-invoice, that you should do only in filing GSTR1. Okay, as I told you, there is a standard format for e-invoice, GST INV01. Next. So remaining things I told you, downloading it in JSON file, all that stuff, and uploading it. Yes, that's all guys. That is what all about e-invoice. Nothing but anything else. Like we have already discussed all the key points. You can just go through the textbook content. So yes, e-invoice is done and dusted. And the last concept of this particular chapter, dynamic QR code. So when we are coming to last concept, whether you are excited or not, I am getting excited because Abba Swami, like chapter is over like that. I am getting the feeling. Okay. So dynamic QR code. So dynamic QR code. So dynamic QR code is provision same like e-invoice, but there aggregate turnover exceeding 5 crores. But here aggregate turnover exceeding 500 crore in any preceding financial year from 17-18, and this is applicable only for B2C invoices. B2B invoices, dynamic QR code is not applicable. Dynamic QR code is nothing but, see, not that when we go to Pani Puri Anna, he will show some dynamic QR code, no, like, sorry, he will show some QR code, no, scan code, scan and pay 20 rupees, 50 rupees, all that. That is not the dynamic QR code, that is static QR code. Dynamic QR code means when you are going for shopping in some places, you are scanning the QR code and automatically the amount is reflecting all that. That means for that particular transaction only that QR code was generated. So that is dynamic QR code. This is mandatory for people whose aggregate turnover is exceeding 500 crores. Others can follow optional. Happily they can follow. This is not e-invoice. This is dynamic QR code. You can happily follow this optionally also, voluntarily also. That is what the concept of dynamic QR code is all about. Okay. Now, sir, if I am raising invoice to person holding unique identity number, should I follow dynamic QR code provisions? Then the law says, sir, even though a person is holding unique identity number, that is not a registration under GST, so treat him as a B2C supply, and for that dynamic QR code provisions are applicable. So that is what the concept. Now the interesting part, sir, dynamic QR code is not applicable for whom? Sir, dynamic QR code is not applicable for insurance company, banking company, financial institutions, NBFCs and GTAs, and passenger transportation services, and cinematographic multiplex screens, supplier of OIDR services, and for exports, because you know exports are treated as B2B supplies. Dynamic QR code is only for B2C. So for exports also, this dynamic QR code provisions are not applicable. So what are the contents of dynamic QR code? All that they have given here. Now there are some small points here regarding some nonsense clarification, but still, sir, deemed compliance with dynamic QR code. There is a doubt that, sir, I am displaying dynamic QR code, but the customer is using any UPI, credit card or debit card or any online banking or cash or combination also, sir. What should I do? Sir, am I violating the law? Like that, suppliers are getting the doubt. Then the department is clarifying, no, it is deemed that you have complied with dynamic QR code provisions. The only thing you cross reference in the invoice, like this, I have given dynamic QR code option. That fellow made a payment only by cash or only by credit card, debit card, like that. So that is why when you go for shopping, first they will ask you what is the mode of payment. If you see in the invoice, there will be something like mode of payment, cash or UPI, like the debit card or etc, etc. Okay, so if you are displaying dynamic QR code, that means enough, you are safe. How that fellow is paying, it doesn't matter. Next, sir, supplier is using some electronic mode of payment like UPI collect, UPI intent or similar modes, sir. For example, you are going to any Apollo pharmacy, etc, etc. You tell them your phone pay number, automatically the request will come in phone pay, or through any other way. You are booking some tickets, maybe through IRCTC app, Book My Show app, all that. There will be phone pay option or phone pay, Google Pay, then automatically request will be routed to your application, phone pay, GPay, all that. So that way they are collecting the consideration. Are they violating the law? That is the doubt. Then the lawmakers, the department has clarified, sir, if you give cross reference in the invoice, like this, we have collected the payment, then that is more than sufficient. You are deemed to be complied with dynamic QR code provisions. Okay. Next, sir, what about prepaid invoices? Sir, when I am going with prepaid invoices, how can I display the dynamic QR code for them to make the payment? How can I print the dynamic QR code in the invoice because it is already prepaid? Give cross reference on the invoice, don't worry. Sir, in case supplies are made through e-commerce operator, sir, the dynamic QR code displayed by the e-commerce operator will have his UPI ID, sir. Then I am not giving my UPI ID. No, is it wrong, sir? Am I doing any mistake? Nothing to worry, that can be done. So dynamic QR code provisions are deemed to be complied with, even though it is displaying the QR code of the e-commerce operator. Next, sir, retail sales over the counter. Normally what will happen, sir, first we will get the order number, sir, order number, then after that we'll make the payment, sir. After getting the payment only we will generate the invoice, sir. That means before generating the invoice itself, first for generating the invoice itself, payment should be done, sir. In such case, how can I print dynamic QR code on the invoice, sir? Should I do that again? Then the law has clarified, no need to worry about that. Order ID, if it is given in the dynamic QR code, if it is capturing the order ID, that is more than sufficient. So like that, sir, part payment has been received, sir. Now dynamic QR code, should I show for the full payment? Not required. Yeah, give cross reference in the invoice. So like that, the details are there. So just nothing to worry, you just ignore it. So with this, we are done with dynamic QR code provisions also, and we are done with this chapter. So friends, hope you have enjoyed this chapter and revised it thoroughly. Fine. So wishing you all the very best again, and see you all in another video. This is your Mr. GST signing off. Jai Hind.